Hello, I am the Kilted Mechanic, and this is my intro video. So these Nissan 4.0 liter V6s, like the one I have in my Xterra right here, are notorious for having these tensioner guides right here wear out. That's typically what goes wrong with the timing chain system. This tensioner guide that guides the secondary timing chain on that side and that side, it's down here on this one, they wear through, and then you'll hear a whining noise. What I heard was a grindy, clanking noise that went from a little grind to suddenly an incredibly major amount of grind. And it turned out that my problem was my water pump, which I can't even get to spin. There goes one of the bearings. Found it. So, this had frozen up so completely that it was riding at an angle. You can see the teeth there are kind of shinier than they should be on the inside, and it had damaged the timing chain. Now my experience with this was that it made a grinding noise twice, and then suddenly it started grinding like crazy. There is a weep hole on these, so as this bearing goes bad, it should start to leak out this weep hole. That weep hole right there, with the orientation of the ears, corresponds to that hole right there. And I'll put a picture up on the screen of where that hole comes out. It is behind the AC compressor, left side of the block, up front. I filled this reservoir, or this cavity right here, this gallery, this coolant weep gallery right here, with water, and it wasn't leaking out. So I took some compressed air and I shot it through there, and I ended up getting it to flow. So I think my weep hole was plugged. Now, whether that was something that just happened because dirt and junk got filled up in it, or if it was leaking and the previous owner smushed some RTV in there, I don't know. But I never noticed a leak while my water pump was failing because that weep hole was plugged. So you might want to check yours. These are the three guides that direct the primary timing chain. 1, 2, 3. The primary timing chain runs off the crankshaft there, rides over the water pump, which I've removed here. The first one guide goes here. It goes around the Vvt Sprocket. This is the variable valve timing sprocket. There's another guide that goes right here. Goes around this side. The tensioner goes right here. And then it comes back around the crankshaft sprocket. As a consequence of this water pump being so bad, the timing chain actually scratched up all the guides. So I needed to replace all the guides as well as the timing chain because it was riding at an angle. So I was able to find a kit from ENGINETECH TS1210 that is pretty much exactly what I need. It's the three guides, the primary timing chain, the two secondary timing chains, and these tensioners, which are the main thing that tend to be the problem, but in my case it's not. These have been replaced by the previous owner, but when the dealership or the mechanic or whatever was in there replacing these, they didn't replace the water pump at the same time, which to me is just absolutely foolish. Water pumps are wear parts. If you're into this timing cover, replace the water pump. It just seems obvious. Here's the water pump that I bought. It's a Hitachi brand. This is the OEM water pump, or it's the OE manufacturer of the water pump is Hitachi. This is a WUP 0003. Got the weep hole right there. 2 sets of gaskets. What these do is one seals the back half of the water pump, which is in the coolant, and the other one seals the front half of the water pump, which is in the timing case, so it's covered in oil. This timing chain is completely lubricated by oil at all times, and the oil pumps flow oil through the timing case. And then in between those 2 gaskets rests the weep hole that if that bearing goes bad, the coolant's under higher pressure than the oil. It should push through the bearing that this is spinning on right now, and it should come out that weep hole and then out that hole in the block that I have that little picture of, and I have a piece of baling wire stuck into that little hole in that photo, so you can hopefully find yours if you need to find yours. It took me forever to figure out that that's what that was. For removing the old water pump, the factory bolt that holds this water pump in is M6. Goes right in there. There's 3 of them. As you can see, mine are actually broken off because I had so much trouble removing this water pump. The way the factory service manual tells you to do it is to take an M8 bolt, because this hole right here that mounts the water pump is actually threaded. And what you're going to do is thread that in there, and it's going to come out the back and push against the interior, front side of the motor there, and push the water pump out. Because the bearing on this was so bad, and also if you don't have an M8 bolt laying around, because the bearing on this was so bad, I couldn't get it out like that, and ended up breaking off the tabs doing it. And I think it's because this was cocked over and actually caught slightly, so the interior coolant passageways in my motor are a little bit chewed by this blade right here. Not so much that I'm concerned about it. I'm gonna flush the coolant out real good and run a good filter and do an oil change quickly and all that kind of stuff to try and collect any debris from this water pump falling apart. And to get this out, I have one of these puller tools like this. That's for pulling like a sprocket or something like that off of something. And what I did was I used that, and I clamped it over there like that, and then the 2 ends of this are held together with a bolt, and then there's threaded holes through there, and that's 3/8/16, and I just threaded 2 bolts in either side and pulled the water pump off like that, clamped around that sprocket. So that worked well for removing it. Just in case you have trouble removing yours because it's so garbaged like mine. But yeah, let's get this one installed. Comes with the 2 sets of seals. They are color coded to indicate which side they go on, and we'll put them on, and then they recommend a little bit of engine oil on there, and then you use the bolt very carefully, tightening them all evenly along in a circle to pull it into place. There are 3 different gaskets that are going to have to get replaced. One is the main crank seal for the main harmonic balancer pulley right there. I bought a National for that. It's I'm not getting good focus on that, but 710356 Is that what that is right there? That's that seal. And then these O-rings I could only find direct from Nissan. These are actually in the mail right now. I'm not able to get this back together yet. But these O-rings go right here and here. So there's 2 of those are required when you remove the timing case. And then there are these seals right here. So this O-ring is the back half of that. Just like that. These seals I am not going to replace. You can find these straight from the Nissan dealership, or I saw them on eBay as well, the Nissan seal for that. I'm not too worried about those. This seal is behind the timing cover, so I'm definitely replacing that one. Here are the covers that go over the VVT sprockets. Just like so. And this is not only a cover, it's actually an oil gallery as well. So this is a hole right here, passes through this cast-in tube, and then comes out the front right there, and actually passes oil through into there and through that O-ring seal right there. Now, I'm not sure if it's pumping out of here and going this way or pumping out of here and going this way. But some people have removed these covers, this timing case cover, without pulling these off. I think that's a bad idea, since this is an oil gallery and it's a real tight fit as it goes inside that VVT sprocket. So I just didn't want to mar it up, and there's actually a seal right there to make sure the oil gets to where it needs to get going. So I didn't want to mar it up or screw it up, and this cover is not easy to get off at all. So I decided it was worth it to pop these things off there in order that I was sure I wasn't marring those up and removing them. If you're just doing the water pump and it hasn't impacted the timing chain, in other words, you just know it's a little bit of leak and maybe a little bit of noise, and you know your timing chain's not damaged and your guides are fine and all that kind of stuff, you can access the water pump through this cover right here. So you don't have to take the full timing case off to get just your water pump out of there. And then you'll need to remove this to release the tensioner pressure in order to get the water pump out past the timing chain, and then reapply the tensioner, and you can do it that way without pulling this whole timing case off, which would be nice because that's a lot less gasket goop to scrape off everything. This entire timing case cover is 100% held on by gasket goop. There is not a real gasket anywhere. It is just gasket goop, and I have spent a lot of time cleaning this off to make this look as nice as it looks right now. Engineers at Nissan, I have something to show you. This is called a gasket. What I actually did was scrape it with a razor blade like you typically do, and then I took a pick and I picked through these channels to loosen all that up, and then I took it outside and I pressure washed it with a fairly low power electric pressure washer, and that all worked pretty well actually to get that all out of there and get these fairly clean. So that's how I did it. You don't want to forget to clean all these. If you don't clean those, you're going to have oil weeping out through those bolt heads. These are where the bolt heads come through right here. And then this casting right here I get such a kick out of. I'm pretty sure the reason why there's this central hole cast into the timing case cover. So this coolant hose right here can connect. Now I have the other half of it removed, but it goes over to there right there. But yeah, I'm pretty confident that the only reason they have a hole cast all the way through the front of the timing cover is so that they can route that coolant hose the way they want to, which is just hilarious. I mean, there's no other way? Really? That's how you had to do it? Huh? Okay. So this is all my parts pile from everything I had to remove. I printed out the timing cover picture, and I put the bolt heads on the timing cover picture as I removed it to make it easier, because there are M12 and M6 bolts, but there are two different lengths of M6 bolts and there are two different lengths of M12 bolts, so I just set them on the corresponding number as I took them out to make it easier to figure out where they go when I go back in. So in order to get your timing case cover off, you're going to have to remove your fan shroud and your electric fan, as well as your mechanical fan. The alternator is going to have to come off, and this bracket right here serves both the alternator and the power steering pump. The power steering pump, I was able to just remove the bolts that held that on and just push it off to the side. I removed the battery just because it was easy enough to do. I always remove this lower cover whenever I'm draining the oil, which if you're removing the timing case cover, you're going to need to drain the oil. The belt tensioner had to come off. Upper and lower radiator hoses had to come off. Quite a bit of this goofy coolant piping that's very obviously in the way of removing things is going to have to come off. The idler pulley had to come off, and then I popped the throttle body off just to give me some better access, but that's not strictly necessary to you could do the job without removing that. The upper collector does not have to come off. I am replacing my spark plugs while I'm in here, and if you want to replace your spark plugs on the right hand side of the motor, you're going to need to remove your upper collector, so I did it. The advantage of removing the upper collector is it makes it easy to find top dead center when you need to. So I placed a bushing in here. This is the bolt that holds the harmonic balancer on, and that's just a big bushing I had laying around that I put in there, so I'm not bottoming out the bolt. So the advantage of removing the upper collector is that you can put something in the number one cylinder. In this case, it's a piece of electrical like fan rod that I had laying around. And as you rotate the harmonic balancer bolt here, you can see that start to come up, which is how you find top dead center quite easily. Now there is also a mark on the harmonic balancer which is keyed onto the crankshaft. The keyway is right there, and then there's a mark on the timing case cover. Spin these around. I don't know if it's the right socket. No, it's not the right socket. But anyway, you spin those around, and there are marks. There's one right there, paint mark right there, and there's another one on this VVT sprocket. I think it's down the bottom right now. Yeah, it's down the bottom right now. And those actually correlate to color-coded links on the timing chain. So when you get all the color-coded links lined up with the marks, that's how you know everything's good. And when you spin it around a couple revolutions, it should come back, and those marks should line up again with the paint marks on the sprockets. And you can find actually color-coded this with some highlighter just to make it easier for myself to kind of know where's what and what correlates to what. And and this is from the factory service manual, which I can put a link to in the description of this video. You can download the individual PDFs. So if there's a clickable section of the service manual that directs you to somewhere else, if you have them all in the same folder, it'll actually move you there, which is kind of cool. So the instructions state right there. The black O-ring goes on the outside and the brown O-ring goes on the inside. Just like so. And that's installed. Next we'll put the guides in and the timing chains. Here's the factory timing chain right here, or maybe not the factory timing chain, but the one I pulled out. And you can see that these two marks line up with that mark, while this mark down here lines up with this mark. So these two are the marks for the VVT sprockets, and this one's the mark for the crank sprocket. So in place, that should be right on the paint mark on the crank sprocket, and these should be right on the paint marks on the VVT sprockets. And if that's all set, then and we're at top dead center, then we should be timed correctly. So we'll put the guides in place, and then we'll pull the plunger down on the tensioner. I'll show you that, and then we'll wrap the timing chain around. This guide right here is just held in by these two bolts. This is the tensioner guide right here, held in by a big 8mm Allen headed shoulder bolt right there. That's a bearing, pivots on that. So there's that. Tensioner goes right here. To relieve the slack, or to relieve the pressure in the tensioner, you push in the plunger, and then you insert, I've just used a piece of baling wire in that hole right there, and that sits in that groove and holds the plunger down and depressed. So you can install it, get all your guides in place, get your chain wrapped around, and then push on that, pull that out, and it'll apply pressure. So I got my marked links, set them onto the dimples. There's a painted dimple dot punched in there. Set the tensioner in place. When I give a little rotation to this, there we go. It's all lined up. I just got to continue along. Now, it's going to be pretty hard to show you lining it up on the crankshaft sprocket, but I think you get the idea. Paint marks with the color-coded links. You're good to go. And then spin the whole engine around a couple times just to make sure that they line back up again and you haven't jumped timing. So what I ended up doing on here to get the timing chain on is I backed off the tensioner shoe here and out of the mounting hole there. It's a big Allen head that you remove that with. And then I wrapped the chain around the crankshaft sprocket, slid it on, and then once I had it kind of slid on and lined up, I pushed this shoe up against this chain here, and then I put the bolt in there. And that was how I was able to get the chain on while lined up with all the marks on the chain and the dimples on the sprockets. And I've rotated it around excuse me, a handful of times now, and there's the timing chain colored link, and then the dimple is right there. So you can see I'm 2 behind on this one. Same thing over here. Dimple is right there on this one, and I'm 2 behind on that one. And then it's really hard to tell down here, but I'm also 2 behind. The marked one is there, and the dimple's over there. So, after rotating it around a handful of times, I'm confident that the timing chain is now in the correct position because it's 2 teeth off on every sprocket. And it was 1 tooth off before. And I think it took about 3 revolutions before it came back to that position. What that means is eventually, as I rotate it around, oh gosh, I can't even imagine how many times. It's going to be a lot of times. But eventually, these are all going to line back up exactly where they were because they're moving the exact same number of teeth every rotation. So I'm confident that the timing chain is in the correct positioning. Next thing to do is to make sure this is all real clean. I'm going to use some lacquer thinner on the mating surfaces that I've scraped clean, and then apply the gasket goop to the timing case cover. So for the gasket goop that you applied to the timing case cover, you want to go with gray. Gray was what was on there that I scraped off. It was all gray gasket goop. And the advantage of gray, it's written right on there, is rigid torque and high, if my camera would focus, and high vibration applications. Take my word for it, that's what it says. And that's because the amount of things that this has to all attach together and seal up is pretty, it's asking a lot of this mating surface. So obviously it connects at the bottom to the oil pan, so the oil pan actually bolts into the underside of the timing case cover. And that's because you've got this oil bath that's coming down the whole thing and then returning to the oil pan to be pumped back up through the cycle again. And the oil pan is a separate piece from the block itself. You're mating the oil pan to the timing case and then the timing case to this, and it's a very large area that you're covering. So the gray gives you that maximum flexibility for an application like this. I was tempted to go with the red, the high heat, but the gray is what Nissan recommends, so I'm going with gray. When I was draining the coolant of this thing, I could not find a radiator petcock anywhere on the radiator, and that really confused me. And I checked the factory service manual, and the coolant drain is actually this little tapered pipe thread bolt that goes into the block. And where it goes is right here, sort of to my right, the engine left, and low of the water pump. So that hole right there, which goes through the timing case cover, it's cast into the timing case cover. This is the seal right here, so this all doesn't have to seal. Goes through the timing case cover, so you can drain the coolant out of the motor without removing the timing case cover, which makes a lot of sense, obviously. And the factory service manual just said to put some gasket maker on that. No, when I pulled that out of there, it looked to me like it had thread sealant on it, so that's what I'm going to use. I'm going to use this Permatex high temp thread sealant on that. That makes the most sense to me. Here are the new O-rings for the Vvt Sprocket galleries. They replace this O-ring and this O-ring right here. I could only find these from Nissan 15066 ZL80. So that's the O-ring to replace that one right there. So after dry fitting this and making sure that nothing's in the way, all the pins are lining up and I'm not missing anything and there's no bracketry or hoses that are interrupting me putting it in place, I'm going to go ahead and apply the bead of silicone or of gasket maker all the way around it. And I specifically bought the caulk gun tube not because I thought it was going to take that much, but because it allows me to, using a caulk gun, apply a nice continuous bead and work all the way around it. And you want to make sure that you caulk up this hole that's cast in there for that coolant tube to pass through, and any of these bolt holes that have the divot around them, that have that hole or that groove around them, because those are mating surfaces as well. So here we go, time to apply caulk, or time to apply gasket maker. And then once it's in place and rested up against there, you finger tighten it until it starts to squeeze out the ends, and then go around with the torque wrench and torque it all down to spec after it's sat and cured for about an hour. And there's two different sizes of bolts that hold this on. There's the M6, which are these smaller ones, M6, and then I believe these right here are M10. And the way it works is there's just two different torque specs. So M6 is like 9 foot-pounds and the M10 is like 41 foot-pounds or something like that. I have the factory service manual pulled up over there, so I'll know what to torque them to. So here we go, we're going to start applying our bead, and I've already replaced that gasket right there as well. Just had to pound the old one out from the backside, which wasn't too hard, and then pound the new one in carefully with a socket that matched that outer diameter. So we're ready to apply the gasket maker and then put it up into place.